How do you want to start it? What's our intro going to be? Hey there, Bureau 311, former Marine. He's good to be here for the beginning. Hey there, Bureau 311, former Marine infantryman, Revolutionary War reenactor, amateur history enthusiast, and where am I?
At the Grout Museum District in Waterloo, Iowa. We're a campus of 5 museums in downtown Waterloo. That is 2 Victorian homes, the Snowden House and the Russell House, Children's Science Museum, the Blue Dorn Science Imaginarium, the local history museum, the Grout Museum of History and Science, and the Sullivan Brothers Iowa Veterans Museum. And I'm the registrar, so I'm in charge of collecting and caring for all of the museum's artifacts.
I do plan on making a video about this later because the 5 Sullivan brothers are from the ones that died in World War II are from Waterloo, right?
Absolutely.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Look forward to a video about that, but that is not what we are here to talk about today. What are we here to talk about today?
We're here to talk about this musket. I've been a follower of your channel since the beginning, and I don't know anything about muskets, truly. And actually, one of the parts of my job is to make connections with experts who actually do have the answers that I don't, and consult with folks, and then use that information that we've gathered to add to this thing's file, right, in the back. So yeah, I'm hoping you can help us identify this piece.
Thanks for calling me an expert. I'm just a guy that likes to read because experts require a lot more than this.
What is it, 10,000 hours?
Yeah, 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
It takes 10,000 hours to be an expert. I'm just a guy with a YouTube channel that reads books that are available on Amazon. But no, so what do you know about this military flintlock musket? We'll keep it quick and then we'll move right into it.
Well, this is going to be embarrassing, but this will, I don't know, this will be fun. So these are some notes that I took for when I hosted a high school field trip. So an AP history class came here 3 years ago, and I wrote up these notes on this piece, just as well as I could, just digging around the internet for like a couple hours. So we'll read what I wrote here, and then we can find out what's wrong about that. So I called it Springfield Model 1795 Pattern Contract Musket, circa 1808 to 1812. Made from Springfield Armory's pattern of 1795, a direct copy of the French Charleville Model 1766. I've seen your channel. This piece is identified as a contract musket by its clip nose cap. I know some of the answers, so it's hard to read this because I read the stuff you emailed me before today. Underslung bayonet lug, U.S. Federal Inspector's cartouche on the left sock flat, that's V over CW, and the CT stamp on the left of the barrel. No maker's mark has been added to the lock plate, save for the numeral 8, which is unknown to me. It has no state militia markings and therefore may have been used by federal troops in the War of 1812 or later, possibly as late as the early stages of the Civil War. In the run-up to the War of 1812, the federal government contracted with 19 arms producers to make up for production deficiencies at both Springfield and Harpers Ferry armories. Most of these contracts had failed by the end of the war due to inflation coupled with a fixed low price that the government would not renegotiate. Only 42,700 of the ordered 85,200 were delivered collectively by the 19 firms.
I mean, it's a musket, so this is correct. So I was actually here last year, and you showed me this musket, and I went home, and I did some readings to try to figure it out. And what's interesting about this gun is it's actually lacking any sort of maker's mark on the outside of the lock plate. It's an American gun. We know that because it has the U.S. with the Federal Eagle on the lock plate. You have a V on the barrel tang, and then you also have your inspector's cartouche on the lock shadow, as well as the Eagle and the CT marking on the breech of the barrel. So we know it's an American gun, but what model of a gun is it? So I went back and looked at U.S. military flintlock muskets, the first book by Peter A. Schmidt. Great reference. I'll link to that below. I've referenced that book heavily. And I was trying to figure out, all right, who made this gun? And it kind of set off a series of events in which we were able to actually kind of pin it down to where it came from, and the history behind this flintlock musket is really interesting. So let's kind of just talk about the gun in general. So this is going to be a early American flintlock military musket. We know it's made for the U.S. military, or we'll get to that in a bit, the militia specifically in a way. It is patterned heavily after the French infantry musket from the system of 1766. And what do we mean by that? This is a 69 caliber smooth bore flintlock military musket. It has a 44.5-inch barrel, which is pretty standard for the French guns. It has, well, it's missing some parts. So it would have, the barrel is held in by a screw here in the barrel tip, as part right here, as well as these 3 barrel bands. And the 3 barrel bands are held in by spring tension right there on the barrel band. So this is the lower barrel band. It's missing a middle barrel band, which would be right here. And it has a pretty interestingly modified nose cap, because that's not how it's supposed to look. The nose cap should come up and be in line with the wood all the way forward to protect it. It's got the bayonet lug on the bottom. It's got an iron ramrod, very similar to a lot of the French guns that I have in my own personal collection. We know it's from the 1766 system because it has this flat lock plate, the flat cock. So, and then you also have on the trigger guard down here how it comes to a pointed edge. The rear sling swivel is missing. It's missing the actual sling swivel, and that's because the middle barrel band would actually be carrying the other sling swivel. So based on the guns that would have been delivered by the French to the Americans during the American Revolutionary War, it cost about $10 in America to produce guns locally, and we were able to get them from the French for about $5. So really good deal for us. Also, when you consider that the French provided us a lot of credit, so we were able to buy French guns on French credit. So
that's how you do it.
That's how you run a business. Yeah, and after the American Revolutionary War, the Americans chose the French infantry musket design, and that's what they used to make the Charleville. And that's what this actually is. This is an American Charleville musket, figuring that came from a subcontractor. But how do we even get here is a fun story. In the 1790s, so right, the U.S. Constitution when the United States first starts, the Article of Confederation, that gets replaced by the U.S. Constitution, 1787. 1792, you have the first Militia Act. In 1795, there's another Militia Act that designates all white males between the ages of 18 to 45 must, within 6 months, provide themselves with a musket, a bayonet, and a cartridge box to carry no less than 24 rounds, and the ball to fit the diameter of the barrel. If you notice that, it's the interesting part about that is that they say that the individual must provide that firearm. And the cost of musket in about this time, a military grade musket, probably be like $11 to $12 to $13, maybe as low as $10.50, maybe as high as $14.50. So now there is a national law that you have to provide yourself with the gun.
I'd be so upset.
Can you
imagine?
The government just tells you that you must now provide yourself with a musket or a firelock.
It's like you have so long to just buy a new car.
You have so long to buy a new car. And we were trying to figure out this for purchase power parity. So I looked it up, and it's about $270 to $300 in today's money, which doesn't sound too bad. But you have to remember, back in the day, you're not making the equivalent money.
It's all white males, right?
And it's all white males,
right?
So that's hundreds of thousands of men.
So yes, it's like a farmer. Yeah, it's a business owner, but it's also like a farm hand.
Yeah.
Or shelf stalker also has to go buy a musket, right?
As per law.
The law, right? And so do you actually have, whatever, $300, but does a farmhand have that, like, in his house? Does he have $300 in his
spend
house?
on?
Does he have the purchasing power, right? Where, like, your day-to-day expenses are, like, literally farm to table, as in the farm is over there and my table is right here, right? So I'm probably not even using money most of the time, right?
You're just barely above water.
I mean, we shouldn't put too much emphasis on, like, a barter system, because people really did pay cash. They shopped for things, right? But still, your average dude, it's like, it is such a burden. That would be such a burden to just, like, drop $300 on something. Yeah.
And you can see right here how that's a problem. So the problem is going to be One, I don't know, I wasn't able to find in my readings how many people actually were able to arm themselves, how many people actually met that requirement, because it's an accessory for a lot of if you're living on like the East Coast and not closer to the Native American areas, you're generally not feeling that unsafe that you need to have a gun. 1795, the Militia Act is put in place. Heading into the early 19th century, we have the Chesapeake Leopard Affair, and that actually spurs the American government to be more prudent into providing for the defense of the nation. Because as you can imagine, just like what we talked about, like how many militiamen actually have a musket? It was kind of hard to have everybody armed with a gun at the beginning of the American Revolution, and there's different variations in calibers and size. Because it doesn't say bring in a 69 caliber or a 75 caliber musket, it just says bring a musket and a bowl to fit the diameter of that. Think of the logistical problems that ensues. That means that every single person showing up, and it's not going to be just 69 or 75. It can be a 65, a 68, a 74, a 73. There could be such variations in the caliber of the barrels that are being used. What's happening during about 1808 also is that the national armories are up and running. Springfield, this comes from a act in 1794, if I remember correctly, to put out, I think it was up to 6 national armories, but we get 2. We get Springfield and we get Harpers Ferry. Springfield starts producing muskets about 1795, and Harpers Ferry does start producing Charleville Pattern of muskets in the early 1800s, but they're also providing the model of 1803 Harpers Ferry rifle as well as a pistol. So the national armories are only making up to 10,000 muskets a year at their max, right? And so that's not enough to fulfill the hundreds of thousands of muskets that would be needed in the event of a war. So we've covered the Militia Act of 1792 and, well, 1792, 95, as well as the national armories are put in place. And now in 1808, we have another Militia Act. And what do you think this one does? The Militia Act of 1808 actually sets aside $200,000 a year in the annual budget of the U.S. government to help the states arm themselves. So now instead of just having John Smith have to completely provide, at least there's some subsidy from the national government to arm up the militia. And we have to remember that militia is going to be the mainstay of national defense. We kind of have this modern conception where the National Army does it. Back in the day, it's the militia, but now the militia is going to get some help from the federal government. Included in the Militia Act of 1808 was they wanted the contractors to produce arms from 500 to 2,000 muskets annually for 5 years, and that gives you about 2,500 to 10,000 muskets total. I've read that around 26 different makers at least made muskets for this contract. I say at least because they have 25 mentioned, and then number 26 is unknown. So this is where the subcontractors are going to come in to help fill out that contract. So I'm going to have my good friend Nick here, and he's going to read the actual contract. And it's going to, for you, the listener and viewer, listen to this contract and think what could be potentially a problem when having a contract. All right, Nick, take it away.
Whereas Henry Dearborn, Esquire, Secretary of the War Department of the United States, has invited proposals for the manufacturing of muskets, spelled Musquets, with bayonets by a public advertisement bearing date the 12th day of May last. And whereas in consequence thereof, a proposal has been made by George Wheeler and Caleb Morrison in the county of Culpeper, state of Virginia, to make and deliver 2,500 stands of the aforesaid arms. Know ye, that in consequence of the foregoing, it is hereby mutually agreed by and between the United States, by the agency of Tench Cox, purveyor of public supplies, and the aforesaid George Wheeler and Caleb Morrison, that the said George Wheeler and Caleb Morrison shall and will manufacture and deliver within 1 year from the date hereof 500 stands of the aforesaid arms, and in each and every subsequent calendar year 500 stands, for and during 4, that's number 4, several and successive years, out of the United States, literally says at of the United States, in the blank space of blank space of the form, kind, dimensions, quality, and substance in all parts of 2 and certain selected pattern muskets with bayonets made at the Public Armory of the United States at blank space. It is further agreed that the price of each of the said stands of arms consisting of muskets with bayonet complete is and shall be $10.75, money of the United States, payable to the amount of each and every parcel delivered on demand for a full and correct inspection by a person or persons to be appointed for the purpose by the United States, and after such inspector shall certify that the arms so by him inspected fully correspond in all their particular parts and in their substance, quality, workmanship, and value with the selected patterns aforesaid. It is expressly conditioned that no member of Congress is or shall be admitted to any share or part of this contract or agreement, or to any benefit to arise thereupon. Wow. Witness the hand of the said Tench Cox, purveyor of public supplies, and the hand and seals of the said George Wheeler and Caleb Morrison, this 21st day of October, 1808, Tench Cox sealed and delivered in the presence of us. I lost track. Who's us? Oh, wait. Is there supposed to be a comma in here? This is a
I think that's the end.
Okay, well, then it says Richard F. Daggett, Jeremiah Strother, purveyor of public supplies, George Wheeler. And then there's somebody's seal, and then Caleb Morrison, and a seal. Oh, there's our signatures and seals. It's a Word document. All right, yeah, that's the end of that.
Now that we've read the contract, what could potentially be an issue here?
Well, friend, as the fellow contracting with the government, you don't know what you're making.
You don't know what you're making, no.
Right, so they've left it blank.
Yep.
So you sign a contract
to make muskets. You know that.
Yes. You know you're making muskets.
You know you're
making
making
You don't know
muskets.
what kind, right?
Yeah.
They say they're going to provide you with a pattern of musket.
But they don't tell you in the contract.
From this place, right? From this public armory. So you sign it first, then they're going to send it to you. And no matter what comes in the mail or by courier, however they get muskets to you, you're going to sell it to them for $10.75. No matter, that's crazy.
That's insane.
And it goes out years and years, right? Yep. You're going to do this again and again and again.
And you have to.
And it's 1808.
You're supposed to provide 500 within the first year. And then every subsequent year, another 500.
Mm-hmm. For 4 years.
For 4 years total.
Right. So that's
5 years total.
Oh.
They include the first year.
Oh,
yeah. And then you provide 500 for the first year. And then the next 4 years, you provide 500 muskets. But you don't know the pattern, specific pattern. They just say of the size and dimension of. And then you don't know the National Armory that's going to be providing you the gun. So how they did this is originally, what I've been reading is that they said we are going to pick guns from Harpers Ferry. That's going to be the pattern of gun. It's not you can kind of get caught up in the semantics of model versus pattern, but it's going to be specifically a pattern of gun. And how they did that is they went into the arsenal where the guns are stored and they pick 2 guns off a gun rack, and they're like, gun 3832 and gun 3834 are going to be sent to you. Copy these guns, right? And then you can now start to see the problem is that it's going to be different for where you're at. And they plan to use Harpers Ferry, but certain gun makers in Springfield, certain contractors are given guns from Springfield. With this information, we were able to piece together that this is from the contract of 1808, and this is a Harpers Ferry. It would be called a Type 1 in the collector's world, but it's the first production run of flintlock muskets military muskets made at Harpers Ferry, the Charleville Pattern. And the Springfield pattern has the bayonet lug on the top, and the Harpers Ferry has the bayonet lug on the bottom. That's for you to know. If you see what a gun that says this is from the 1808 contract, and it's a contractor gun, and the bayonet lug is usually the first thing I look at. Where is the location of a bayonet lug? And if it's on top, it came from Springfield. If it's on bottom, it came from Harpers Ferry. So the government sends these contracts out, and the contractors don't start providing muskets on time. So when looking through my references, it seemed to take a couple of years for the guns to be provided. And you can imagine why that's happening is because they're getting tooled up. They're finding skilled craftsmen because now you're providing the US government with 500 guns a year. And they're already a little bit behind schedule. And then in 1812, something happens that's not very good for you if you are a maker of these contract guns. If you're a contractor making the guns for the US government, and that's the War of 1812. And this is basically going to start throwing things off because now the prices of labor, material, all that's going through the roof. But
You've already
you signed for 1075.
Oh my God.
You're going to be providing to the U.S. government a gun for them. And to kind of wrap up the legal issues, people extend the contract, they subcontract, which is what I think this is because it's lacking the maker's marks, and they start just providing guns to the U.S. government, and all the way up through 1815, which is 7 years after what should have been a 5-year. There's also some legal stuff that goes back and forth we won't get into. But so that's kind of the general overview of the contract. Next, what do we know about this gun specifically? Well, we know now that it's one of the Type 1s, Charleville Pattern muskets that would have been made at Harpers Ferry. This is a copy of one of those patterns. And what's interesting is on the shadow of the lock plate, we see a V and a CW. So this was actually what really helped solidify what this gun is and its time frame. That V means it's viewed and inspected by CW is Charles Williams. Charles Williams had started off working in the National Armories, and now he's an inspector going around to make sure that, as per the contract, you are meeting the size and the dimensions that you're required to do as per contract. If you look over at the barrel, you can see that there is what's left of an eagle, barely visible, and that's your eagle proof. And then you also have the CT under it. And I've seen the CT stands for this is a contractor barrel. It's always one of the most interesting things about looking at these historic arms and the production of military flintlocks is the failure rate of barrels. It's about a 10% failure rate. What I mean by proofing of a barrel, they usually put 2 to 3 times the amount of powder with a 1-ounce ball inside the barrel, and they would set it off. They would make sure that they would then inspect the barrel to see if it's bulged out, cracked, or been broken. You would stand the barrel up, you would put water down it, and to see if any water had broken out. And if you pass through all those, then the barrel has now been proofed and it would be accepted into the government arsenals. So that sort of wraps up the history of the gun. You can say with very good certainty that this is a contractor-made gun from the Militia Act of 1808. Charles Williams inspected it and approved it, and it's based off of the Type 1 Harpers Ferry design. Where it went from there, only God knows. Before it ended up here in this museum in Waterloo, Iowa. And this is not out on display. This is just within the museum as a whole.
Yep. It's back in the storerooms. It's been okay. So most museums exhibit perhaps 10% of their collections at any given time, and collections rotate through exhibits. So I've been here for 10 years, not in this job. I've been working for the museum for 10 years in this or that job. I've been in this job since 2017. And during my time here, this has been on exhibit, I think, 3 times.
Okay. That will wrap up this episode of Flintlock Friday, a different kind of variation of Flintlock Friday, but very fun as well. I learned a lot about this because I had to go figure it out. It was kind of a fun experience because I didn't know who made it on the lock. So, I usually feel decently comfortable, but when you don't have a lock, don't have a maker's mark, it was a very fun gun to kind of dive into the history. And the real selling point was having that inspector's mark. And yeah, so leave a comment down below if there's something that stands out to you about the whole process that you can kind of correlate to today. If there's anything that you want to say, Nick, to close us out.
Just that the museum appreciates it. This was a pleasure. I learned a lot. This is great. And everything we talked about today, everything on the papers, I'm going to file with this piece.
Oh, awesome.
Right? So I can reference it every time this goes on exhibit or anybody asks about it. No, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me and having me in here to look at a piece of history. So in closing, if you've made it this far, thank you so much. And you can make your own connections from the past to the present to see how much really hasn't changed, and how maybe when filling out a contract, you want to make sure you're getting the best deal, because the government wrote a really good contract on this one. And what's interesting is there's going to be a part 2 of this, because we're looking at another gun as well, and that's going to be made by Eli Whitney, and that's going to be his model of 1812, and that's going to be another contractor gun with its own fun story. So look forward to that. That'll be coming out after this. All right, until next time, take care.